Hello and welcome.
Yep, makes sense.
Want to give a warm welcome to our two presenters here from Dell. We have David Konetski and Brett Hansen, and they're going to talk about the future of malware attacks.
Super, thank you. Brett Hansen here. I'm Executive Director of Data Security Solutions at Dell. I am happy to be joined by David Konetski, who is one of the Dell Fellows in Security, so a deep expert in security. And we're going to spend a few minutes talking about cyber threats and malware and all these scary terms that are floating around. So to kick this off, we hear a lot of really bad stories of breaches out there in the marketplace, big companies, small companies. We hear about crypto lockers and polymorphics, and the names alone are scary, and yet companies are struggling with where to begin and what to do and how to start to address these threats. So from your perspective, if you were talking to a CISO or CTO or CIO, where would you say to start to address stopping these external threats and these external attacks?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. When I talk to CISOs or IT professionals who are trying to put together their security strategies, always have to ask them a couple of questions. First, what are they trying to protect? And the corollary to that is, what are they worried about? And then I have to take the answer to that, and combine that with what we see in the industry as far as the evolution of attacks, what the adversaries are thinking about, the way they're coming at an enterprise, whether they're coming at it through the endpoint, whether they're attacking the network or both, and then whether they're trying to actually deploy malware or they're trying to do something else, like steal credentials. Lately, to give you some trends, so lately when we talk to customers, and CISOs I should say, their biggest concerns are two. They want to make sure that their data is protected. A lot of the recent attacks, a lot of the very harmful recent attacks have been exfiltration of data. In other words, stealing data from corporations to be able either to use it to hurt that corporation or to actually steal their IP so that they can duplicate what they do and ruin their business. Or they worry about employee productivity. So if you're able to disable resources, or they're called denial of service attacks, then you're able to shut down businesses, whether it be for days, weeks, months. A great example of that is the Sony hack. So they did both. You know, they stole IP, but then they shut down the majority of the data center, and it took a good part of a couple of months to rebuild that infrastructure. So that's usually what they're most worried about. And so then we have to look at what direction are the hackers coming, and they're really it's a much more sophisticated world than it used to be. It used to be that you'd be able to use a couple of months and you'd write a successful attack, and then you'd be able to deploy that attack over and over and over again. And that's really not the case. The defenses have gotten much better, so that means that hackers have to be faster. Their attacks have to be, Brett used the word polymorphic, meaning they have to change themselves on a regular basis. Some of them are sophisticated enough to be able to change themselves every couple of milliseconds. So you'll never see the same thing coming at you twice. They're also coming after credentials. So if they can do a human attack, in other words, go after a person and trick them into doing something and grab their credentials, now they're a validated person on the network, and they can do whatever they want to do to be able to attack your infrastructure. So it's really two different ways that we need to protect our customers against losing their data, or denial of service, or resource, getting rid of their resources so that they can't do business. So kind of given that, I talked about talking to CISOs, but there's the business side of the
Right.
house as well. What are they concerned about? Obviously there's a lot of technology that they have to be cognizant of, but from the business side, what are the customers most worried about?
Well, the good news is, first, they're becoming more aware that they need to be concerned, right? So a few years ago, there was a gap in awareness around how do you stop, how do you prevent, how important is this? And now we've seen that gap diminish, while the vast majority of CEOs and board of directors are involved in cybersecurity. The challenge is there's now a gap in terms of being aware and understanding. Again, we use all these complicated terms like polymorphics and spear phishing and all those sort of things, and they kind of get lost into the business vernacular. So one of the things that I think is important for them to understand is, okay, what are the business implications, right? And so that's the conversation that we need to have with CEOs and CFOs and CMOs is, it's not about technology, it's about your business. If you have a breach like Sony, like Home Depot, like Target, like Anthem, all these folks, what does it mean to your business? And you started off in the right conversation, which is, let's talk about your business and what are important for you to protect. Do you have IP? Do you have customer information? Do you have information that's covered by some form of compliance mandate? And then what do we need to protect against that? The challenge that they have, though, is it so quickly becomes a technology decision discussion, and there is a gap in sort of bridging between a CSO and their vernacular and a CEO and their vernacular. And so there's an opportunity for the business and the industry as a whole to start to sort of pull those things together. If the CEO has a mindset, I'm going to go do these actions, I'm going to go and start partnering more with folks in China, or I'm going to allow my employees to work from home, and the CSO is not involved in those decisions, what you're going to find is you're going to find a gap in technology. And that's the challenge I think a lot of our customers are dealing with, is how do you bridge that and how do you pull that together? Do you have any recommendations for a CISO on how to start to talk to their CEO and how to help them become better informed?
Well, yeah, I do, and because there's vast differences in technologies that address all of these areas.
Yep.
A good example is if you look at anti-malware, right? So there's three basic types of anti-malware that are out there in the field today. One is traditional signature-based anti-malware. It's been used for the last decade and a half, 2 decades, and the whole premise of that is they're going to see something that's bad. They're going to create a signature or create some kind of identifier of that piece of code, and so the next time that they see it, they know it's bad and they won't let it run. It's a pretty straightforward approach. The problem is, as I mentioned, all of the malware is becoming polymorphic, or it's changing itself, or there's just such a flood of new malware, hundreds of thousands of new pieces of malware hitting the internet on a daily basis, that the signature-based systems will never see it because it's something that's brand new. They will have never seen it before. So most everything is going to get through. And those are referred to as zero-day attacks or advanced persistent threats, are all those things that are going to get through those systems. So you really see the new world of anti-malware coming out. And that new world is really either behavioral-based or it's prevention-based using machine learning. And we have a very strong opinion as to how you want to go about that. Most systems that you see out there are behavioral-based. In other words, they're going to watch the system, they're going to let it run, and then they're going to stop immediately when they see that there's something funky going on. But it's already been running. And if you look at an attack like a crypto locker, everybody is probably familiar with crypto locker or ransomware. The goal of that software is to lock your machine as fast as they can, and then they have time to go up and get the keys, encrypt the data, but they need to get that machine locked immediately. So if they can be a millisecond faster than the detection system that you have running on the box, you've lost. Now your machine is locked, all of your data is encrypted, and you have to pay a ransom to get it all back. So we believe in prediction and protection before the malware ever runs. So that's an example of why it's important to have that technology discussion with the CISO, so that they understand the ramifications to their business. Whether they're willing to stay traditional and maybe let a lot of the 0 days and advanced persistent threats through, whether they go behavioral and catch, let's call it 60% of the things that are out there, but they're going to lose one machine for every new threat that's out there, and that's going to take a toll. Or whether they want to go something that's predictive and preventive.
Well, you mentioned the one machine every time one piece of malware gets through. I mean, isn't that a consideration as well? I mean, yes, there is the data extraction or filtration, there is shutting down the network, but just the cost of having to go and remediate device after device that's getting breached, and if we're talking about, you said hundreds of thousands of new pieces of malware every day, and those are hitting the network, isn't that going to start creating a cost associated with this above and beyond a data breach or IP loss?
Absolutely. And if you look at the full solution, when we talk about malware protection, you have to have a very holistic approach. And if you look at, a lot of people have what they call their circle of advanced threat protection, and it's usually some variation of prediction, prevention, meaning predict that something's bad, prevent it from running. But then detection, meaning if it gets through, you have to be able to detect that it's running and find out there's something bad going on, and then remediation. So being able to shut it down and then clean the world up and bring it back to good. A lot of people have asked, why do I need something that's going to protect 99% of all malware coming into my machine if I've got the world's best detection system?
Right.
Because I have a contract with a forensics and a remediation company who's going to come in and clean me up. And the answer is just exactly that. If you pay a monitoring service, that's great, but if you have an incident and they have to come in, put feet on the street and clean you up, that's going to be extremely expensive. So you want to reduce that response requirement as much as possible. So you want to have the best defenses up front. So we believe in prevention and then keep remediation for those things that less than 1% that may actually get through your enterprise.
So the narrative on the street that it's not if, it's when, you believe we can defeat, given the fact that there's technology out there that can detect or predict and then prevent from actually compromising devices.
There's always going to be new attacks.
Always been okay.
Technologists talking
a security
now.
hedge, right? There we go.
There's always going to be new attacks. So you can never say 100%.
Absolutely.
So you'll have to have a holistic approach, as I called it, or some people will call it defense in depth, in that you have to have a layered approach to be able to address prevention as well as remediation and forensics.
Makes sense?
Yep.
So as you look forward out into the future, you look at your crystal ball, you sort of hedged the last one when I said, okay, can we really prevent this? What is on the horizon? What are some of the new attack formats that companies should be aware of, they should be thinking about getting themselves ahead of? What's next?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, if you would have asked me that question last year, I would have said our biggest attack surface is zero-day malware that's being detonated on our boxes. But now with new technology that is available in the marketplace, we are able to prevent the execution of over 99% of that malware. So now we have to go to the next thing. And what's the next thing? A lot of the attacks that are happening in enterprise today are malware-less attacks. So in other words, they're doing phishing, they're getting user credentials that are moving laterally inside the network, and then they're attacking as an admin, and they have free reign of your network. You want to stop people from that attack. And so how do you do that? And really the only way that you can do that is to have a robust usage-based or behavioral-based detection system, but not code behavior, user behavior. So if you see that someone has never accessed a certain data share, and now they're accessing that data share and they're pulling information and they're sending it out somewhere in the internet, that's a pretty good indication that either one isn't that employee,
right, yep.
or two, that employee has gone rogue. And you want to know about either one of those. So that next layer that the industry is working on is the way to do, they call it insider threat. So that that insider threat may be an employee or it may be someone masquerading as an employee. And that's the next frontier.
And I think that one of the things that companies are going to have to start looking at is how do you balance empowering employees? How do you balance having a more collaborative, more mobile, the new workforce era that we're on, while at the same time maintaining their security threats? And a lot of the companies I do talk to are struggling with that very issue, right? CIOs want to say yes. They want to say, yes, go and use Dropbox or Box or OneDrive. They want to go and say, yes, you can work from home or use your mobile device. But at the same time, they're increasingly hesitant to say yes because it's creating these new security threats. As you said, that's the new horizon of attacks. In fact, Dell just did a survey to over 1,000 IT decision makers in the line of business, and we found that 83% of them were restricting mobility. So they're trying to put the genie back in the bottle in many ways to say, no, we don't want you mobile because we need to improve our security. So it certainly is a situation where it seems in the marketplace where customers and employees and companies are facing this dilemma of saying, we know we need to be secure, we know that we need to address these new form of threats, but at the same time we want to have a future-ready workforce. Any advice, any recommendations on how to grapple with that challenge?
It's my opinion you have to do both. You have to have technological enablement so that you can say yes. You have to give IT departments choice as to how they give access to resources. So if you're able to put technological systems in place to be able to protect data no matter where it moves in the world, and then also give IT departments the choice of using user location, who they are, what machine they're on, context about their environment as to how you want them to have access to that data. So do you want to just give them the key to the data, or do you want to give them virtual access to the data? There's a lot of different ways we can approach it. But that has to be augmented with, and I know people roll their eyes when you say this, but with user education. So there's been survey after survey that shows
Right.
that user education reduces the the success of attacks by 50 to 75%, depending on the different survey that you see. And it's just a matter of does your IT department put out phishing emails to its employees? Do they log how many people have clicked on it? Do they do education then afterwards to have people understand why they shouldn't be clicking on things, or how to better look at emails, or look at website links, or that type of thing? So it's a combination of the two.
Yeah, there are no absolutes, as you said, in security, and certainly we've heard, and I've seen companies that have really well thought out, well designed education programs, so they're not backing that up by the technology. And as you said, I mean, AVAM is pervasive. Almost all companies are using some form of advanced anti-malware or antivirus, anti-malware. The challenge, of course, is if it was working, we would not be hearing about these attacks. So you have to combine education with the technology that actually can allow employees to protect themselves. Because let's face it, a great spear phishing attack is almost impossible to detect no matter how well educated you are.
Agreed.
So as we look out in the future, another area that we hear a lot about at South by Southwest is IoT. And obviously, you talk about end users being the primary threat vector today because of us being human and being collaborative and wanting to go do things. IoT has a different challenge, right? Now we're talking about a dramatic increase in number of endpoints, amount of data flow. What new challenges is that going to create into enterprises as we start talking about IoT?
It's actually the same challenges. It's just implementation is different because you don't have a user, and the endpoints are usually what they call headless. There's no monitor, there's no
Right.
keyboard, there's no one interacting with it. So you still have to do the same things. You have to protect the data.
Yep.
You have to have a robust identity system. So I need to know what that endpoint is, so I can set up a relationship with that endpoint, even though it's a machine. And I need to have advanced threat protection, because there's malware going after my headless endpoints just as much as they're going after the ones that are manned by people. So it's the same problem, you just have to go about it a little different. So from an identity system, instead of doing user authentication, which is usually kind of a multi-factor, whether it be biometric or smart card or token-based, we need to do some kind of zero-knowledge identity generation at the endpoint, machine generation of an endpoint identity, and then create that trusted link with whether it be a gateway or whether it be a backend. And then once you're able to create that trusted and secure link, now you're able to pass information securely.
Right.
It's all about creating that secure link and being able to protect the data from the point it's created until the point it is consumed on the back end.
And the advanced threat protection side, is the attacks going to be the similar types of attacks? Obviously, spear phishing won't work on a headless endpoint device, but what are we likely to see? Are we likely to see more of these polymorphic attacks? Where is that headed?
Probably the biggest difference is the operating system changes. So the operating system that's running on these endpoints is rarely going to be a Mac OS or a Windows. It's going to be some variation of Linux or some other embedded OS. And so the attacks are going to be honed or targeted towards those OSs. So getting the behavioral models and getting the malware models understood for those new OSs is going to be the challenge.
Yeah. So obviously a lot of things happening. We've went through a couple different areas, couple of threat vectors. We've been talking sort of at a higher level, more like larger businesses. As we look around South by Southwest and all the small businesses and entrepreneurs, how is the threat different for them versus a large corporation, like sort of what we have been talking about?
Yeah, the threats are very similar.
Right.
The payoff is different.
Okay.
But you also have to think about most large enterprises have security on their mind, as you just let us know.
Yep.
The smaller businesses are struggling. They don't have security experts that can deploy in their small businesses. So really the technology providers, like Dell and others, have to go to as a service or a subscription model. And the industry is moving that way. I mean, over the next 18 months, you'll see a lot of people moving to a subscription and as a service model. And so that, whether it be a value-added reseller who's able to manage that for the small business, or whether it be a very easy, click the big, the easy button and have it all come down on the box, and it just monitors itself and then gives you alert when there's a problem. A lot of different ways to attack the problem, but the solutions have to be very similar.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, small business often assume that they're not at risk, right? I'm not big enough to be attacked. I'm not Target. I'm not Home Depot. I'm not Sony, as all the big names we know. Yet, according to all the research, increasingly as those companies invest more and have more sophisticated attack protection, the attackers are turning to a small and mid-sized business, which is the soft underbelly. So even a small business could be attacked, whether it's a financial attack, I'm going after their bank accounts or their customer information, or are they a means to get to a larger company? If a smaller company is doing business, especially in defense or in finance, they might be targeted not for their information, but for their access into the large organization. So it's a challenge to help even small businesses become aware of, yes, you too are at risk and you too need to protect yourself, because let's face it, the implications to a smaller business are actually even higher. A significant data loss could be the end of the business, not just a setback like a Home Depot or a Target.
That's right. That's right. And you may actually see attacks not based on monetary gain. You might actually see attacks based on removing the competition from your business in an area.
Yep.
Right? It's a whole different way of looking at the problem.
So a lot of interesting things happening in small businesses, large business, IoT. You're seeing great changes in technology. You're seeing the attacks change. Sort of, when you're talking to a CSO, we sort of bring this to a conclusion. What are the 2 or 3 things you leave them with when you're having a conversation?
Make sure your data is protected everywhere it goes, from the point of creation to the point of access and use. Make sure that you have a robust, multi-layered advanced threat protection system so that you can protect your assets and keep your employees productive.
Right.
Learn how to say yes and not no. Right, so instead of saying no and trying to keep everybody protected back at the house with the doors locked, let them go outside, have fun, be productive, be even more productive. You'll have a much more efficient business, but you have to put the protections in place to allow that to happen, to enable that to happen.
Okay, great advice. If I'm talking to a CEO or a line of business, similar type thoughts, the first thing I always begin with is know what you want to protect, right? It all comes down to appreciating where are the crown jewels and how do you want to protect those. The second, and this is really the biggest step that a lot of companies have to take, is cybersecurity shouldn't be held off in a separate area. Cybersecurity should be part of your overall business strategy. If you want to empower your workforce to work from home to say yes, you need to have a cybersecurity strategy that reflects that change. If you want to go and start to partner with companies outside the United States, you need to be aware of the cybersecurity implications. And so it's very important to start weaving cybersecurity into your business strategy versus keeping it as a separate identity. You don't keep HR separate, you don't keep marketing separate, cybersecurity should be kept separate either. And the last thing I always bring home is the biggest risk to your company in cybersecurity is you. The people are the biggest risk. And oftentimes I hear from CSSOs when I talk to them is, my worst end user is my CEO or my board of directors. They're the ones who are bringing devices and saying, hey, make this work, without fully appreciating the implications of that. So you need to be aware that first and foremost, end users are the threat vector that we have to do the most to protect right now. And you have to set the example from an education perspective and a behavioral perspective to say, this is important and we need to embrace this.
Absolutely.
I think we have a few time for questions. Are there questions from the audience?
I have a mic here if there are.
So a great talk. What's your recommendation to companies that have been victims of ransomware? What should they do? Should they pay the ransom to get the data back, or just say goodbye and enhance their security afterwards?
So I've consulted some of the foremost experts in the world on this topic. Everybody from CERT to our internal folks at SecureWorks. And the recommendation is to pay the ransom. This is a business. So there hasn't been any rampant fraud. I know it's kind of funny to say that there's fraud associated with malware, but there hasn't been any rampant fraud in that business, in that industry. You get your data back. And from what I've seen, the prices have actually started coming down, depending on the crypto locker that's out there. But unfortunately, the best thing you can do is obviously protect yourself up front, back up all your data so that you can just recover. You don't have to pay. You just re-image the machine. But if you're not backed up, and they do get through, pay the ransom. Yep.
Don't then you become a mark for an additional attack because you're now a known payer of ransom?
So I would turn that back around and say, if your house was just burgled, would you necessarily be a return customer to that burglar? Probably not. They're going to assume that you're going to put on bigger locks on the doors, you're going to put in a security system, maybe you're going to hire a guard to stand out front, right? Because you don't ever want this to happen again. So I'm not saying that it won't happen again, but I'm saying that necessarily, if I was a hacker, I'd go somewhere else.
And
I'd look for the unlocked door instead of the locked door.
Yeah, to build on that point, I think that what I've heard from companies who have been attacked and had some sort of compromise, they're the first in our door knocking on it saying, what can we do to better protect ourselves? Just like you would if you've had your house compromised, you're going to want to go and protect it. I mean, the good news with ransomware is, yes, it's extremely effective, but there are tools to protect it. It's just about implementing those tools and then making sure you do have the education that people aren't doing anything egregiously wrong to put you at higher risk. So, I mean, ransomware as in broad entity is not one of the more sophisticated forms of attack. It's typically a drop-on attack, it's a spearfish, it's a watering hole attack. So there's ways to prevent that. Companies usually take those actions, unfortunately, after they've been compromised. Other questions? If not, thank you all for your time. Hope you have a great South by Southwest.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Brett.